Hey everyone, it's Ryan Leonard with Wolfnest Property Management, and today we're going to be talking really broadly about Utah landlord laws and rights. So, first thing we have here is what exactly are Utah landlord laws? So, Utah landlord laws are a set of legal clauses that the state that states your rights and duties as a landlord. Now, typically, landlords' rights can really be lined up to be applicable to the property that they're leasing. But it is important to recognize that you do have to abide by Utah Fair Housing laws, Utah Fair Premises Act, and other state laws and requirements or standards to make sure that you are in accordance with the law. Now, understanding the Utah landlord laws can help prevent any tenant dispute, which is a big one. You know, knowing your laws, your rights, but also the tenant's laws and rights is a great way to avoid possibly going to court if you don't abide by those. So let's take a look at a couple of them here. First one is lease agreements. Now, I highly recommend that if you are renting your property, do not do it based on a handshake, a text, or an email. Make sure that you have a valid lease agreement, and also a lease agreement that is going to be the most up to date. You know, make sure that there's any laws or acts that you want to make sure are listed in that agreement. You want to have that in there. Now, bottom line, you're not required if it's a shorter term lease to do this, but if it is over a 12-month lease, it is something that is required here in the state of Utah. Now, also, if that lease expires, and I see this all the time from DIY landlords, is that they've had a tenant in place for the last 6 years. They had agreement the first year, but then it's just gone month to month ever since. That's really the default. If the lease expires and the tenant's still living there, it's automatically reverted or transformed, I guess you could call it, into a month to month lease. So just something to kind of keep in mind when you see those leases that have expired. Now, big thing with the lease too is making sure that everything in that lease agreement is spelled out and it's spelled out clearly. So some of the things that you have to have on that lease is the legal name and address of the rental property owner. Also, you want to make sure you have conditions needed for repairs. Legal address and description of the property. I see this mistake all the time where the on the lease the property address is not listed accurately. Just make sure that the address is spelled out exactly how it reads on any tax information, like the property tax info, the parcel data, your yearly tax, property tax forms. Those are all things that are going to be accurate. So you want to make sure that lease agreement reflects the exact same thing. Rent payment conditions. Is rent due on the 1st of the month or is it due on the 5th of the month? Are there any grace periods? These are all things that you want to make sure are spelled out in that lease agreement. Also, access to the property conditions. You know, how much of an advance notice do you need to give that tenant to access the property? Is it a 2-day, 48-hour, or is it a 1-day, 24-hour, or a week notice? These are all things that, you know, having them spelled out in the lease prior to that tenant moving in is going to be geared to how you want to manage that property or be able to access it. Also, the security deposit. Not only what is the security deposit amount, is any portion of that non-refundable? And if it is it for cleaning? Also, spelling out the security deposit disposition. How long does the landlord have to complete that security deposit disposition and make that refund back to the tenant? So these are all things that you want to make sure that you have in your lease. Now, as far as landlord rights, the most basic ones are kind of what we talked about in that lease. The legal right to collect rent payments. Also send notices. So if the tenant is not abiding by lease agreements, they need to post a 3-day notice to comply or a 3-day notice to pay or vacate. Also security deposits, damages, what is really that wear and tear or damage, how long they have to make I guess, sufficient effort to get those things replaced. So at the end of the day, just make sure that you have really those basic items that we discussed about before in that lease agreement. Now, as far as responsibilities, the biggest thing here is that you are abiding by really 2 things: Utah Fair Housing laws and also Utah Fair Premises Act. Now, Utah Fit Premises Act is really, pretty straightforward. It's making sure that the property is habitable. Doors and windows lock, electrical systems work, heating, plumbing, air is all in working condition prior to that tenant moving in. And then also, if there is, let's say, a 3-day issue, there's no running water at the property would be an example. The landlord has 3 days to make sufficient attempts to get that corrected or fix that problem before the tenant can technically pack up and move out of that property, and there really can't be any recourse from you, the property manager. So obviously make sure that you're abiding by Utah Fair Housing laws, Utah Fair Premises Act, and this is also something that should be laid out in that lease agreement. There should be a section devoted to the tenant's laws and responsibilities that really show, hey, this is, what I need to do to protect your best interests as well. So make sure in your lease agreement you really spell out the tenants, the laws and responsibilities that benefit the tenant. So I know it can all be kind of confusing, and every year, to make it even more confusing, this is going to change. So what is applicable or up to code or law in 2021, there may be a change come 2022. So just make sure you're always staying up to date, looking at any big changes that may happen in landlord laws, tenant laws, Utah Fair Premises Act, fair housing laws. These are all things that you want to make sure that you're up to date in. So if this is just over your head and hard for you to wrap your head around, here's my contact information. I'd be happy to discuss your lease agreement, our lease agreements, and see, bottom line, if maybe you should make the transfer over to a professional management company, or at least bolster up your lease agreement to make sure that you have everything that you need. So again, there's my email, there's my phone. Feel free to give me a call. I'd be happy to discuss our services and see if they could be a good fit for your portfolio. All right, take care.